Hi everybody, my name is Sergiu. People have been asking me to make more videos about art in general, but also my own art for quite a while now, so why not, I like this kind of stuff. And this is gonna be technically my second art video, and I'm talking about how I design characters. And by character design I mean behavior and anatomy for now. I didn't quite get into stories yet, but either way, let's see. Now, visual art such as painting and 3D are hobbies of mine that sometimes I dive into because they help me maintain my sanity. Now, I'm good with drawing, but 3D is very new to me. I only actually started doing this kind of thing during the first lockdown in April, and then I went into work and had to basically stop again until recently, but I'm gonna use Blender to show you a 3D model that I made of my favorite character design, Loney the lizard. This is only my, third scene I think? Yeah, my third scene that I ever made in 3D, so if there are any CGI experts among you, you most probably noticed some beginning mistakes in my workflow. And I still have a lot to learn about materials and compositing, but the model works for my project, so I'm good for now. Rant over, let's get into it. So basically, I want to talk about how I view art and how I approach it, because those of you that ask me to make these videos now know what I'm trying to do here, but I figured I'd just say a few words for the people that don't. Art is by definition a physical or visual or auditory creation that alters your current state in a positive way, such as for example lifting your mood, or making you feel loved or empowered, or making you feel like you're not alone in your struggles. Now, my interpretation is that any person can create art. I don't care how good you're able to draw or sing or write or whatever it is that you do, as long as the piece you have or created serves as a token of instilling an enhanced emotional state, it's art. And it doesn't matter what other people feel about it because it's already doing what it's designed to do. So, did you draw a stick figure, or did you write a piece of text that puts a smile on your face? Now that's art. Or did you create some sort of an object out of, I don't know, like matches or toothpicks that inspires you in some way or brings back a good memory? That's art. Do you have such a creation in your possession that somebody else made? Maybe you purchased it at an auction, or maybe your kids or your friends made it for you and has the same effect. Well, that's also art. But we're social creatures, we want to share. So if your artworks invoke similar feelings in other people, good, you just did an amazing thing, and that's what matters. But art is also very subjective. I'd suggest don't force your own views and, feelings onto other people. Just share your work and let them come to you instead. It's not like you have to worry about that anyway. There's like 8 billion people out there, it's pretty much guaranteed that somebody's gonna relate. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I like to have fun making non-human concept characters and environments. But the problem with concept designs is that you're just piecing things together in order to create something novel, which means that there is no actual reference for you to use. And those of you that are, who are basically familiar with drawing and painting, you already know that visual references are crucial. So I decided that the only way forward for me is to get into 3D modeling, because it allows you to view your models from any angle, which makes for great reference. Now next, let me tell you about an art concept called speculative evolution, which is basically an attempt to create imaginary evolution paths based in reality. So things like, what would the Earth be like if the Chicxulub impact never happened? So scientifically speaking, what would the creatures of Earth look and live like, in your opinion? Or what is the lineage of some alien creature on some planet you're designing or thinking about? Does that creature actually make sense in the environment they're in? And if not, what is their story? How did they come to be? How intelligent is that creature? Stuff like that. Now, I'm not doing speculative evolution art exclusively, and I'm not an astrobiologist by any means, but basically I keep it at the back of my mind because I create concept characters which are biological life forms based on our understanding of life, and I wish for them to make as much sense as possible because that makes it easier to relate to them. Now, no hard feelings for machine-based life, though. I love machines. I'm just better inspired by biological life. Some people may say that basing my characters on life as we know it is biased and wrong for concept characters because life is, there's a possibility for life to develop in exotic ways outside of our understanding, which is a good point. But you need a strong story to back that up. I don't really make a very good writer, so I need characters that basically are relatable. Now, another important concept on which my art is based is that there's purely creative choices, such as certain colors or features that the character has, which serve some sort of a purpose, such as display or defense, or you simply just like those features and you want them on your character. However, I must say that I'm not the kind of person that designs a character which has features specifically tuned to interrelate with your instincts and cognitive biases, especially by using a humanoid form. And this may be a slightly controversial here, but I'm not living that in that anthropomorphic bubble, because the human form is not necessary, nor is it common for intelligence. That's a scientific fact. The only human feature that is actually required is the human hand, more specifically our thumb, basically, so that the creature can grab tools and objects. Although ants can do farming and build cities without one, so, there's that. And also, I don't agree with the characters which have physiological features specifically tailored to their personality and intentions. If you think about it, this is just Hollywood trickery. You couldn't possibly know somebody based entirely on how they look. And I'm having serious trouble getting inspired when I attempt to connect with a character like that, because it doesn't make any sense, I mean, let me give you an example. Have you noticed that a lot of evil monster characters in movies tend to have marine life or insect features? Our anxiety kicks in when we see, pointy and sharp features, but that doesn't equal evil. Characters which are designed to be obnoxiously obvious simply don't draw me in, and I'm the same in daily life. And I can afford to pursue this train of thought because for me this is just a hobby. So I don't have an art director telling me what sells and what doesn't. I'd rather look at why us humans and other forms of intelligent life have communities and personhood and other such amazing qualities, because it's okay for characters to be their own non-human person, and yes, they can totally be a non-human person that you can approach. Now, humans have much more amazing things to give to the universe than biases and instincts. We have presence of mind, we have imagination, communication, and so forth. And intelligence creates this common ground between us humans and other forms of intelligent life, and instead of humanizing them, why not explore what's actually there? If you watch space exploration shows, you'll often hear the scientists say, we don't understand why people are stuck in this anthropocentric view of the universe when reality is exponentially more interesting and diverse. And I totally agree. Now, in almost all cases, the aliens in movies and stories and games are just projections of human. And expecting aliens to look like and behave like us is not impossible, but it's so unlikely that it's ridiculous to think that way, The sheer complexity of the chain of events that allowed humans to evolve on its own, it should be a red flag, Luckily, however, this is slowly changing in the mainstream media, but it's mainly independent creators that you usually see hovering towards this line of thinking. Although I've seen exceptions on Netflix and YouTube, and a few fantasy books. Don't get me wrong though, I don't have anything against humans, it's just, think about it, it took 5 apocalypses for us to have a chance. That we know of, right? What about the other seemingly endless possibilities for species different from us to develop a similar or higher level of intelligence? To me, a person is a person, and in my story, I want to be able to approach them, regardless of what species they are, or whether where they come from. And yes, there's a chance that personhood is not even the ultimate goal for intelligence, but I don't have an understanding of that level, and neither does my audience, so I'm just gonna stick to things that make sense, because we're making art here and graphics here, not science. So let's have a look at an actual example. I only ever made one art video so far, which was also about Loney, in which I talked about drawing him into a real life photo with me, and that was a lot of fun, but to be fair, I'm not exactly happy with this drawing because I actually got a few anatomical things completely wrong due to not having a good enough reference. Now, this was the point at which I started thinking that perhaps drawing doesn't actually really work for me on its own. Now, the only piece of reference I had was this reference sheet that I drew a few years ago, and it's actually more accurate to what I have in mind, but something is still off about it. And it's not 3D, so voila! I don't know how to animate, so he's not moving, I'm afraid, which kinda sucks, but I hope my terrible CGI works anyway. So think of this as more of a character description than anything else. So he's a Xia lizard of planet Xia, and his species looks more like a dinosauromorph. Now, I call him a lizard for lack of a better name basically, but he's not exactly like a typical earth reptile because they reproduce much like the platypus rather than lizards. His species is a highly intelligent predatory bilaterian vertebrate which evolved from some form of semi-aquatic species that was endemic to his home region on planet Xia, and they emerged as the apex predator of that region. Now, Xia lizards are endothermic and they still much prefer freshwater food over anything else, but they are technically omnivores. Being bound to a specific region allow them to develop in their own way over time, growing into a unique species that achieve personhood. They still make great swimmers due to the huge tails and strong bodies, even though they're now a land species. They have some mammalian features, but the main reason they look like a dinosauromorph is because they retain some of the physical features that a semi-aquatic creature would need to move in 3 dimensions. We know that this is possible because creatures have gone from water to land and back here on Earth. Browsing through the taxonomy of Earth life served as a huge inspiration for his development, as he's a form of life as we know it that developed under the same laws of physics after all, and that's kind of the basic idea behind the design. Now, they do have some sort of molecule that stores genetic information, but it doesn't necessarily have to be DNA. To be fair, I didn't get that far. Xia lizards also have very short fur. It's barely visible, but it's there. You may say that this is too much like an Earth creature to be an alien. Well, that could be true, but then, if the physics are the same as they are here on Earth, then creatures would then need to have some familiar features, right? Such as, locomotion and various senses so that they can interact with the environment and find food. And in the case of Loney, predatory features such as forward-facing eyes, because predators have a higher chance of developing intelligence, and also hands so that they can grab tools because, have intelligent creatures make use of their physiological advantages, and so forth. But let me show you some examples of Earth species that inspired me. Humans are the only species that we know of in real life that possess a type of intelligence that we are familiar with, so humans are the main example of intelligence that I can draw from, but cetaceans are arguably the most intelligent water creatures that we know of, so they also served as an example because Loney's ancestors were semi-aquatic and his ancestors were aquatic. But as far as anatomy is concerned, let's Google a few things. Now, I'm not very good with browsing the taxonomy, so I'm just gonna Google Ave metatarsalia. Don't necessarily take the Wikipedia article as correct. New discoveries are being made, which cause these things to change all the time. But as of now, this is the clade for the archosaurs that were closer to birds than crocodilians. And that's what I'm interested in for Xia lizards. If we have a look at the cladogram, we can browse all the way through to the dracohorse, which contain the clade Dinosauria, which needs no introduction, but also the Silosauridae, which is less known, but this is the sister clade to the dinosaurs, their closest relatives if you may. Now click on that and you'll find some interesting stuff. Once again, these are not considered dinosaurs, but if you click on a Silosaurus, for example, you can see the basic anatomical shape that I was going for. This is technically a possibility for a creature that was an aquatic or a semi-aquatic in the past, but also I just simply like this body form. I think it looks awesome, and they have 5 fingers too, which is interesting. Next, we have Lagosuchus, which served as an inspiration as well, so let's look that one up. This one is another example of this form, although they are a bit smaller. Allosaurus was also an inspiration. That's a dinosaur, but it's important to have dinosaur inspiration because they are known for their upright bipedal posture, especially due to their distinguished hip joints, and Loney is an upright bipedal, so I needed to know how far I can realistically push his design. But I also had mammalian inspiration, more specifically kangaroos. So if I type in kangaroo on Google Images, right, let's see. I was interested in the upper half of their body, more specifically their shoulders, chest, and upper arms. To me, it looks like this anatomical design fits, because kangaroos are mammals, yet if you look into it, you'll start seeing similarities between kangaroos and dinosaurs, and it made artistic sense to me. See? Obviously, these are quite different in reality. I've been researching the biology of various animals, mainly because I needed to understand what sort of changes occur with evolution and why. Now that I had a general idea for a body form that fits my creative vision and makes sense anatomically, I could start sketching out his species. I went through a bunch of different things, figuring out how large they are, how their muscles are placed, what sort of body structure works, what sort of sensory organs they have and why, how much movement the joints allow for and for what reasons, and so forth. Now, of course, the more you think about anatomy, the more you keep changing it, but I didn't want to lose too much of that dinosaur form because it's very familiar, and as I mentioned, it's much more difficult to relate to an exotic life form that we don't understand. Right, so let's continue then. Now, I wanted his species to be strong but also agile because after all, they lead very physically active lifestyles and they have the ability to make high jumps and run fast. They evolved intelligence initially because since they were confined to their region, they had to start getting creative with their hunting and food preservation, and their prey didn't have time to catch up, which is good because they managed not to overhunt themselves into oblivion. Now, their colors can slightly vary towards blue, and their health can influence colors as well. For example, the more color they lack, the less healthy they are. But let's dive into intelligence a bit more. Now, I wanted them to be highly intelligent because when people first saw my drawings, they thought of dinosaurs with dragon features. And then, let's face it, it's a known fact that dinosaurs are quite dumb. And I wanted basically to contrast that idea. And also, an intelligent creature is way more relatable. You need some special conditions for intelligence to develop, such as the body-to-brain ratio being in favor, as far as we can tell, enough oxygen to power those huge brains, and things like, the need to get creative in order to find food. It looks like evolution will do anything in order to enable a creature to eat, including the development of a huge brain. But if prey or food is plenty and easy to catch, and the environment isn't challenging, you don't need a big brain for that, basically. That's why intelligence is so rare. Surviving doesn't really require it. Yet somehow these guys are fully developed persons, so they can talk and behave in a familiar way, they can comprehend knowledge and communicate it, and they have their own community, because it seems like smart creatures are social more often than not. They can build and use tools. I couldn't find a more effective way of enabling the use of tools than giving them opposable thumbs. And a big brain is just not enough. You need to have physiological advantages like this to go with the brain. I'm working on the environment as well, but I need better CGI for that. But in the meantime, I can tell you a bit more about Loney's individual life. This is all stuff I'm still developing, but it's just so you know a few more things about Loney as an individual, because I've been getting a lot of questions about this on DeviantArt especially, and I think it's just a lot easier for me to have it all in one video. Now, what can I tell you about him? Basically, he was raised by his uncle's family. He never actually met his real parents. His father disappeared, nobody knows what happened to his mother, but his uncle and his family raised him as if he was their own son, so he actually had a pretty good family. Planet Xia is a multi-intelligent species planet, some of which moved there from other planets. Xia lizards, on the other hand, are one of the very few indigenous species on planet Xia, and since they do spend their entire lives in their homeland, which is a huge island actually, their entire history revolves around that island. I need a name for the island, by the way. Now, the thing they pride themselves with as a species is the fighting techniques they develop. In fact, his uncle runs the main fighting temple on the island and trained Loney into one of the masters. Loney keeps a low profile though, but he's dedicating his life to further developing these fighting techniques, and it's interesting to see and think about how exactly that works for his anatomy. Now, they're the best at what they do, and I think it's pretty interesting, it's a pretty interesting history to have. Now, usually Xia lizards don't leave their island, but interestingly enough, Loney did, and he moved to the capital region on planet Xia called the Crayonia region. He's living in a village relatively close to the largest city on Xia, Waterhead City. Now, the reason he moved away is basically he's functioning much better if he's on his own, which is why I named him Loney in the first place. Now, he spends a lot of time alone, working or training. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't like friends, but he's a natural introvert, if you may. I think he's an interesting individual to develop. Well, I think that's about it for today. Now, I don't want to do the whole story here because I don't want to spoil it. Because, again, I don't know how to animate, and I'm hoping to learn to do that. Because it'll make the whole thing a lot more fun, And basically, the reason why I started drawing in the first place was because I wanted to envision what it would be like to encounter other species of intelligent life. But then I really got into it and decided to get a bit more artistic about it and envision creatures that on one hand I would like to exist, but on the other hand, they make biological sense, and there isn't a day going by that I don't think about that. I mean, it's the ultimate question, isn't it? But, yeah, here's my take. And, from here, I want to keep working and developing, and I want to attempt to concept even more characters, and perhaps write a story to go with the whole thing. It's a fun hobby for me, and I like talking about it. I'm glad that other people found it interesting enough to ask me to make videos, because I'm quite happy to do so. And hope you liked it, and I'm working on developing my CGI skills. Now, I hope that one day I'll have an entire arsenal of characters and some cool graphics to go with them. So, yeah. Bye-bye.